Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Natalie Pipertis, and I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to all of you joining us today for the SRA Webinar series. Once again, I'm very happy to see many of you today, and I'm confident that the webinars today will be very interesting and entertaining. I'm convinced that our must-attend event will again provide fundamental perspective on the engaging landscape of sugarcane breeding at SRA. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of this nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodian of the lands on which SRA is located and where we conduct our business. We pay our respects to ancestors and elders, past and present. So today's presentation will run for about 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Felicity Atkin, whose presentation today will unveil everything you wanted to know about the private life of sugarcane. So, as I just mentioned, the title today of this webinar is How the Magic Happens, Cross-Pollination in the Honeymoon Suite and New Sugarcane Variety. And once again, I felt very privileged because despite a very, very busy schedule, Felicity accepted without hesitation to give this webinar. And for that, I am very grateful. I believe it had something to do with her passion for what she does, and it will transpire through this presentation, as you will see. And we are very lucky as well because she loves what she does, and she also likes to share her passions with us. Dr. Felicity Atkin has over 24 years' experience in sugarcane breeding. Early in her career, Felicity was the Southern Variety Officer in Bundaberg from 2001, and then she started a PhD in 2007, investigating the use of novel statistical methods to improve parental breeding values for sugarcane family data. Felicity currently oversees the Northern Variety Development Program and the SRA Cross Pollination Program, which is field and photoperiod crossing and parent management, producing sugarcane seed for all SRA Selection Programs. Recent successes including the development and commercial release of SRA 26 in 19, SRA 28 in 20, SRA 37 in 22 to the northern sugarcane growers. I had the chance myself to go to Meringa, and it's always a great time to be up there. And I had the opportunity to participate in crossing with Felicity and her team in Meringa. Personally, I liked everything about the process of crossing, except for the snakes and the wildlife encounters, obviously, which is quite frequent up there. But somehow the team has always been very kind and protected me. Sometimes I wonder if I was more like a help or an hindrance, but I actually think they grew fond of me because when I had some progeny from my crosses, they actually set it up very close to the station, so I had less chance to meet with snakes. But anyway, without further delay, Felicity, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Well, let me just get my slideshow going. Just bear with me 1 minute, I apologize. Can everybody see my slides, Natalie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much. That's wonderful. I guess it's one of those things that most people are familiar with the selection part of the variety development program, in particular the pointy end, where it comes to the development of the final assessment trials and then through to commercial release. But not many people have the opportunity, I guess, to see how we produce those new varieties, because it's all mostly done here at Meringa. We're the main crossing station, the main breeding station for the whole Australian sugar industry. So unless you've had a unique opportunity to visit Meringa and participate in one of my tours, what we do here is, I guess, a little bit hidden. And so I would like to take the opportunity just to explain to everyone exactly how we produce new varieties. Firstly, I'd like to just give you a very brief overview of what we're trying to achieve in the Variety Development Program, and then how the crossing program fits into that. So SRA, we do operate one crossing program that supports all of the 6 regional selection programs. Plus, we also have a disease screening program at Woodford. Without it, we have no idea of the population resistance of our parents, our progeny, or the commercial varieties to any of our major diseases. So it's a very important component of the breeding program. Now, the 6 regional selection programs, because the Australian sugar industry is spread across somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 kilometres across the eastern seaboard, they're all separated by latitude. So we do have different disease issues, we have different climatic conditions and different soil types within those regions. And that's part of the reason why over the 100-year history we have developed those 6 selection programs. And to support all of those programs, including the disease program, we do have a very large team of highly committed people. My last head count, I believe, was about 58 people within variety development supporting at various different parts of each of the stages and behind the scenes. To where the ultimate objective that we're working towards is a more profitable sugar industry through variety release. Basically, identifying more productive, more profitable varieties across the whole value chain from growing, milling, marketing sugar. That's our ultimate objective, making everyone more profitable. And how do we do that? So in the SRA breeding program, we do have 3 major components to achieve that. The first is creating the genetic variability, which is what we do here at Meringa with the crossing program. And that's where I'm going to be spending most of my time, is focusing on that. Then sorting through that genetic variation that we create, that's the selection program. And that's the part where most people are familiar with. And then also, most importantly, is population improvement. Constantly trying to improve our parent population. Otherwise, we're making the same combinations and only achieving the same gains. It's basically, think of it as garbage in, garbage out. We really need to improve that parent population so we can continue those gains into the future. Just a basic schematic of the selection program, which most of you will be familiar with. It is a 3-stage selection program of where we do start off with approximately 100 seedlings every year in that first stage. All the way through to commercial release, it does take us at least 12 years from the seedling stage all the way through to commercial release, where we hope to release anywhere from 2 to 4 commercial varieties across the whole industry. But how do we create those 100,000 seedlings that we work with? So we have been, so SRA has a long history of breeding new varieties for the Australian sugar industry. We've been doing it through cross pollination since 1926. So we're a couple of years shy of 100 years history of breeding for new varieties. Previously, we were collecting seed, naturally pollinated seed from field flowers, and also importing varieties from other industries. 1926, we started the crossing program at South Johnson Experiment Station, not far down the road, but where the rainfall is double what we get here at Meringa. So you imagine we have 2 meters of rainfall a year here, 4 meters down at South Johnson. It didn't take long to realise it was too wet and they had too many females. So sentinel crops were planted all around the north, and they found that the experiment station that had already established here at Meringa in 1917 was an ideal location to relocate the crossing program. And we've been doing cross-pollination activities here since 1934. And again, the main reason is to create that new genetic variation that we want to discriminate against in the selection program. So what does our parent population look like? Well, we actually maintain quite a large parent population here at Meringa. We've got roughly about 2,500 parents that are made up of domestic parents, parents that have come through our own selection program. Some of them are commercial varieties. Some of them never made the commercial grade, but are actually make really good parents. We have a lot of international varieties. We have a memorandum of understanding, exchange agreements with at least 15 other international breeding programs where we do exchange varieties for the main purpose for using for cross-pollination. And they make up about 22% of our parent population. Several of them are proven parents for us and consistently produce really good progeny. We also have access to a lot of basic germplasm, which we use as part of the introgression program, where we try to tap into and identify any novel genes within that population, and also introgression hybrids from various species, which again are used for the same purpose and also to improve disease resistance and vigor and returnability of our commercial varieties. So you're probably wondering, that's a lot of parents. Do you use them all? No, we don't. So each year we do review our parent population and we will identify parents which we would really like to use in the crossing program based on their breeding history. So we calculate breeding values both through progeny performance and more recently using genomic predictions as well. We use disease information, pedigree information. Sugarcane is a naturally outcrossing species, so it does suffer from inbreeding depression. We want to avoid crossing siblings, mother and son together, cousins. So we actively avoid inbreeding. So that pedigree information is very important. We also look at selection rate. So the probability of a parent having offspring make it through to the final stage of the selection program and through to commercial release. And again, we're constantly assessing what we would like to introduce into the parent population, whether it's the international varieties or elite clones from each of the selection programs. At the same time, we want to identify parents which we want to discard. They're no longer productive. We've got better parents. This year, in reviewing the parent population, I've just discarded 150 parents for that very reason. They're no longer productive or were never productive to start with. Right, so of that 2,500 that we have available to us, we often only select about 400 or 500 that we want to look at on an annual basis. And it might end up that we only use between 200 and 250 parents from that 500 in any given year. And that's partly because of the challenges that we face with getting parents to flower, which I'll go into in a bit more detail in the coming slides. We do have two distinct crossing programs. One is the field crossing program and one is the photoperiod crossing program. And again, I'll go through one of some of the challenges that we face, which has led to investment in the photoperiod facilities to overcome them. So when it comes to natural flowering in the field, we often find that field flowering here at Meringa is sparse and unreliable. Sugarcane can be a bit of a diva when it comes to flowering. Sugarcane, unlike a lot of other crops that other people might work on, is a short day plant. So it's actually triggered to flower by a decrease in day length. And what we've found is the ideal day length, the declination in day length is 45 seconds every day, of which here at this particular latitude at Meringa is between the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, quite appropriate given what we do, all the way through to the 10th of March. So we have a 25-day window of opportunity for the conditions the natural conditions here at Meringa to trigger the sugarcane parents to flower in the field. We do find that it is very dependent on environmental conditions as well. So there are some key environmental triggers that do affect field flowering here, of which we find ambient temperature, it has the biggest effect. So during the 25-day window, any temperatures above 32 degrees, we start to get a decrease in floral initiation. So I've got, sorry, a couple of slides that show it shortly. Yeah, so that means that in any given year, on average, about 35% of our parents in the field will flower. In a poor year, it could be as low as 10 to 15%. In a good year, it could be as many as 65%. And within that flowering window, we can get parents that are early flowers, mid flowers, and late flowers. So often the parents that we want to cross between each other do not synchronize, so we can't even achieve the crosses that we would like to make. So that means that with field crossing, we often can only really achieve, we have to take a more of a opportunistic strategy than being quite targeted, because often what we want to flower either won't flower or they're flowering at the wrong time of the year. Just to illustrate that, this is one of our flowering blocks in 2013. It was a very hot year. We had about 19 of our 25 days above 32 degrees during that initiation period. And so floral initiation was suppressed. I think we only had about 15% of our parents flower. And you can imagine we're just making the best possible combinations on any of those given days. Versus one of our record years in 2014. That's the same block, just a different angle, but those two blocks are exactly the same, and you can see the huge difference that we can get in field flowering just by having ideal conditions. So you can imagine then that we can be more targeted in the crosses that we can make in a year like 2014 and not like 2013. And I'm finding, I've been here at Meringa for 14 years now, almost 15. We're experiencing more of these low flowering years than we are these high flowering years. So over the years, we have invested in building 3 photoperiod facilities to help control those conditions and improve our level of flowering and improve the crossing strategies that we can actually take. So by using the climate-controlled photoperiod facilities that we have here at Meringa, we can actually delay the initiation period for the parents outside of those hot months of February, March. So we don't start initiation until April when we know we're out of those hot months. We give each of the parents a precise sunrise and sunset so we can control the decrease in day length exactly. We're not affected by any of the twilight effects that we might have on cloudy days. And we can also control the nighttime temperature so we can get optimal pollen viability as well. And what we've found is by controlling all of those conditions, we can improve our flowering success from 35% in the field to 90-95% of our parents in the photoperiod facilities actually producing usable flowers. You can appreciate then we can take a very much more of a strategic approach to crossing when we can synchronize flowering. So we have 9 chambers. Each of them we can control independently. So this time of the year, breeders, including myself, we've created lists of parents that we want for crossing next year, plus a list of cross combinations. I'm in the process of reviewing those cross combinations and the flowering history of those parents. How many days from initiation does it take to produce a usable flower? And then I will strategically place them in different treatments for initiation time, start time, to try and maximize how many of those cross combinations we can actually achieve. So an early flower, I will put in a late treatment, and a late flower, put in an early treatment with the expectation that they'll flower at the same time. So that now that at least half of the crosses that we make in the photoperiod facilities are from those commissioned crosses that each of the breeders want. They're quite sophisticated facilities, and they have made a huge impact in the crossing program, but they're not cheap. Over the years, we have invested at least $2 million in building these 3 facilities. The first one was built in 1986 at the cost of $250,000. I wish it was $250,000. B facility came online in 1998 at the cost of $500,000, and then C facility is our newest one at the cost of $1.2 million. And so for us to build a 4th one, if we ever were to, would probably be close to $2 million itself. But these 3 facilities have already paid themselves off in the commercial release of, it's released at least 8 commercial varieties from the photoperiod facilities. We have also just invested roughly about $620,000 over the last 2 financial years in improvements in the photoperiod facilities, so we can get another 40 years out of them in terms of structural improvements in the controls that we use, all of those sorts of things that will either increase the longevity or reduce or eliminate any critical breakdowns that we might have during a crossing season, which can impact it severely. So I've already identified some of the challenges that we face when it comes to crossing. Most of those we can control by using the photoperiod facilities, but as Natalie alluded to, there are some other challenges that we face that make it interesting. Some of them we can't control. Cyclones, we have been impacted by cyclones in the crossing program, and this year was a very good example after Cyclone Jasper and the very active wet season that we had meant that this year was the very first year in our almost 100-year history that we did not do any field crossing. We do often encounter wildlife, whether that's in the form of snakes, wasps, spiders, you name it, we see it. But there are some pests of either the feathered kind or the 4-legged kind, including pigs, that also do have impacts on the crossing program by attacking valuable parents, which we run the risk of losing sometimes if we can't control those pests. And strangely, another one, which you wouldn't think being here in the tropics, is what I would consider cold winters. So you imagine sugarcane is a tropical grass where we do experience male sterility in, male sterility in temperatures below 18 degrees. Temperatures below 18 degrees at nighttime, it starts to impact the pollen viability of the flowers. And when I go through the presentation, you'll understand more why that is a problem. So they're just some of the fun challenges that we have to go through, not on a daily basis, but occasionally. So we do have the field flowering and photoperiod flowering seasons, but what does an average day look like for myself, for Viv, and for Danielle? We are the main team here who do most of the crossing. What does our average day look like? So first off, we start with doing the census. what parents do we actually have available and how many? And we take a pollen sample. So in the field, we walk the fields, every plot of every parent, twice a week on a Monday and a Thursday, and we will record on our mobile phones, on our mobile devices, where we have a database, how many parents we have available. And what we're looking for, I don't know if you can see that picture just in the middle at the top. If you can see, there are some florets that are just starting to open. You can see the anthers poking out. That's what we're looking for. Just as the tip of the flower is just starting to open, we will count that as a usable flower. So we want to know how many. Often we also record the size of the flowers. And then we take a pollen test. And you can see both Viv and Danielle there in the photoperiod facilities, cutting out parents and recording information, ready for us to do some pollen testing. Because we do have variable nighttime temperatures here at Meringa, we do pollen test every time we want to use a parent. Even if it's the same parent that we used a week ago, we find that the pollen test can vary from day to day, from week to week, depending on what those nighttime temperatures are doing. So you can see here, we specialize in the art of teasing. We can do up to 300 tests per day, sitting there in the pollen room, teasing out all the pollen from the anthers onto a slide, where Viv will then do a basic starch test to determine whether a particular parent is a boy or a girl. What we are looking for is the amount of stained pollen grains, the percentage of stained pollen grains, and that will then determine whether we use it as a male or a female. Basically, a female is an infertile male. Most flowers have both male and female reproductive parts, and it really just comes down to how much viable pollen each of the flowers have, and that's how we use it. We find this is a critical part in the program, determining what we use as a male or a female to optimize to get the best pollination and seed set from our flowers. We don't emasculate like other sugar industries do, where they dip the males into hot water to kill the pollen. We don't do that. We just strategically use each of the parents based on the pollen grains, the pollen viability. So now we know what we've got available, what gender they are. We also know what disease information we have on them, the pedigree information, seed availability from previous years, and any of the other information that we might need goes into our crossing database, BidNet. I like to think of it as Tinder for sugarcane, where we sit there and we go through all the potential combinations. It ranks the best combination to the top of the list, all the way down to the poorest combination. And Danielle and I will sit there and we'll go through and we'll assess them all and go, no, 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 yes, we'll select that one. So even though the algorithms will rank them according to the best, the best quality crosses ranking to the top, we also look at other attributes of each of those crosses to determine whether we're going to make them or not. That includes that pollen compatibility. That also includes the size of the flowers that we recorded at the census. You can imagine if we wanted to cross one tiny little male flower with a really big female, what's his ability to pollinate that female? Not very well. So then that information is important for us to know, to know, do we actually make that cross combination? Do we need about 3 or 4 of the male flowers just for one female? So that's where some of the art comes into it. It would be nice if the software could just go and automatically allocate all of cross combinations, but we know that we're not going to get the best success in terms of seed set and germination successes if we were just to do that. You can see here I've listed 3 different types of cross types that we do routinely make. We mostly make biparental crosses where we will cross one female with one male flower, one female with one male parent, sometimes up to multiple flowers. Reciprocal crosses where we regularly do cross 2 males together, test as male, treat as female. So we will cross 2 males together of very similar or equal pollen counts and a same size of the panicles, the flowers themselves. And we will harvest the seed from each of those flowers and treat them as a female. And then sometimes, depending on what parents we have available, we often only make factorial crosses when we are limited with males and we have more females than males and we want to maximize how many cross combinations we can make. We often put up to 4 different females with the 1 lucky male, and that's a factorial cross. And these are just some examples of what we had made this crossing season. So now that we've selected what parent combinations we want to make, we will then go cut the flowers if it's field crossing, or arrange the crosses, the flowers that we've already cut from the photoperiod facilities if we're in the middle of the photoperiod crossing season. So anyone who has had an opportunity to come to Meringa might know this piece of rainforest that we have in the middle of the station and just think that it's a piece of remnant forest. It's not. That's our honeymoon suite. So in amongst that rainforest, we use it as a windbreak. We have 4 crossing sheds where we have hanging from the crossing sheds are fabric lanterns, which we use for controlled pollination. So this is where we take all the happy couples. This is where I like to say, this is where all the magic happens. What we do is we lay all of the parents out in their different combinations, and we make sure that they're all at the correct height so that the male parent is taller by about 1/2 to 1 foot than the female. Then we go and inspect the female, and there's a photo of Viv there inspecting the female flowers, and she is plucking off any of the open florets which may have already been pollinated. Basically, we're taking her back to a virgin state. So we know exactly which male flower has pollinated which female flower. And it's very important for us to be able to trace the pedigree of each of the crosses that we make. Then we arrange the parents in each of the fabric lanterns. Again, the fabric lanterns are of a particular weave where it reduces the pollen contamination. It's a fine enough weave that pollen can't fly in from the outside or also move outside. So once we have them in the fabric lanterns, they stay there for 2 weeks. So a sugarcane flower will open from the top down, and it takes roughly between 7 to 10 days for it to open up completely, which is why we keep them in the lanterns for up to 14 days. So we can make sure that the male has done his job in pollinating the female. At the same time, because we maintain them in a crossing solution, a Hawaiian solution, the stalks, the flowers will continue to grow. So twice a week, we inspect the heights just to make sure that the male is always taller than the female, because we find that every day, around about between 9 and 10 a.m., when we get a decrease in humidity and an increase in temperature, that male flower will dehisce. He'll start to release his pollen and pollinate the female every day. So Viv is often busy over in the crossing paddock, tying up lanterns. Every morning she goes over there and she taps the lanterns, gives them some encouragement. And then after lunch, she'll go and open up those lanterns again to air them out. So we don't end up with the humidity that we have here. If we don't untie them every day, we will end up with moldy flowers. We don't want moldy flowers. So this all happens over a 2-week period. After 2 weeks, the male's done his job. He's no longer needed. So we throw him away. And that photo on the left-hand side, that's the heap of males that we have discarded. Lucky males. So we throw the males away and we keep the females. We do hold on to them again for a minimum of a week. So we find that the females need to ripen for a minimum of 21 days. Otherwise, we don't get good seed set. And we will maintain them for a maximum of 6 weeks. So the whole time in that crossing solution, topping it up twice a week, we can keep a cut flower for up to 6 to 8 weeks. Once it's starting to fluff off, we will harvest the seed and we will dry it down in a dehumidifier at 11 degrees and 13% humidity for a minimum of 4 days. And then this is where the seed work starts. So we have all these crosses that we've made and we want to know what success we've had. So we will actually start processing and weighing the seed. Anything that has yielded more than 5 grams of seed, we will take a 1 gram sample and do a germination test on it. Based on that 1 gram germination test, we will determine whether we discard that cross. We do find that we discard up to 30% of the crosses that we make just because they don't yield enough at all, or they didn't, there was no pollination at all. Based on that 1 gram test, we then know how we can bag the seed so that when a breeder like myself then comes to select a bag of seed the following year, I have a rough idea of how many seedlings I might expect. So a high valued cross, I might select 2 or 3 bags of seed if I want to put up to 1,000 individuals to the field of a particular cross combination, or if it's a cross combination that I haven't tried before and it's using new parents, I might only select 1 bag of seed and take up to 200 seedlings to the field. Once we do that, we vacuum seal. Once we know how many grams per bag we want, we vacuum seal them in foil bags and we store them in our seed freezer at -20 degrees. And that seed will remain viable for several years for breeders to then select either the next year or the year after, or also then just becomes part of SRA's germplasm collection if we were to ever get any future disease incursions, pest incursions, where we have to go back and dip into seed to try and identify any new sources of variation for hopefully not a new disease. In our seed store, we do have at the moment roughly 50,000 bags of seed, of which the oldest seed dates back to 1988. So I have seed in the seed store here that is older than some of the technicians as part of the variety development team here in Meringa. Makes me feel old. So now that we have these packets of seed, this is then what each of the breeders, so then based on progeny performance of combinations we've already made, based on the performance of parents, how they've performed in the selection program. We will then use these bags of seed to then create the starting population for the start of the selection process, which I showed you briefly before. So all of that work goes into producing new sources of variation for the start of the selection process, and creating that population of 100,000 seedlings where we hope to release new commercial varieties. So the crosses that we have made this year will potentially be the source of new commercial varieties in 13 years' time. And again, with the ultimate objective of making the sugar industry more profitable through variety release, whether that's improving cane yield, sugar content, fiber content, if we're looking at biomass and cogeneration, and as well as improving disease resistance. That's our ultimate objective, and that's what we're working towards, not only in the crossing program, but the selection program as well. So it may not seem like a lot of work, but these are all of the people that contribute to different parts of the crossing program each year, including the 5 variety development managers. Viv and Danielle is the main part of the crossing team, and if you include myself in that, we have between the 3 of us at least 70 years worth of experience collectively in the crossing program. Also supporting the crossing program is the rest of the variety development team here at Meringa, and then also other staff within the variety development team, whether it's in supporting the plant breeding database that we use, whether it's doing all the data analysis to generate the breeding values, involved in importing those international varieties which we use in our crossing program, as well as helping generate those GUBVs as well. So it is really a huge team effort, of which is shared by everyone. And I think we do a good job. And I find it really rewarding, especially when you see those commercial varieties make it out to the field and know that you had a hand in it. Someone like Viv, who's been doing this particular role for 40 years, almost everything that's grown commercially out in the field, she has had, she's been involved in almost every parts of those steps that I've just gone through. We like to call her the mother of all sugarcane varieties. She doesn't like that, but I apologize, Viv. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felicity, for a very informative presentation. I think very thorough. And so I'm sure there will be lots of questions. So to ask a question, you can type it into the chat or raise your hand using the hand button, also located on the bar at the top of the screen. You will need to unmute your microphone to ask a question when prompted. And then we ask you to mute your microphone after that. So I think there's a question from Shaming. Go ahead, Shaming.
There's no question, just the cross.
Just a what, sorry? I didn't hear what.
No, he has his hand raised.
Okay, we did it.
There's some questions in the
yeah. I'll just get back to Shaming. Yeah. So we got a question for Waradung. How can we select which variety should be used as a female based on the amount of female by / male pollen in your flower or desired traits? Thank you.
Well, it's kind of both, because first of all, ideally we would like to just go with the desired traits, but if a particular flower, if a particular parent doesn't produce enough pollen, then you get no pollination. There's no point in trying to cross 2 females together, because they're just not going to pollinate each other. So ideally we want to do both. And again, it comes down to that, how much viable pollen does that parent actually produce? And that will determine then how we use it in a cross combination.
Thank you.
And we do find, I might just add to that. There are some parents that are consistently female that just have very little to no pollen viability, regardless of the temperatures. Then we have some parents which are consistently male. Our commercial variety Q200 is a good example. It will, without a doubt, regardless of the temperature, it will always be a strong male. Then we have the majority of the parents that we do play with can range in pollen viability on a daily, weekly basis. They can go from male to female on a weekly basis, which is why we do pollen test every single crossing operation.
Thank you, Felicity. So there is a question from Raul Costello, actually two. I'll just do one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done changes of lighting system in the PF using LED light sources? And do you think that there will be a big effect on flowering induction?
That's a good question, Raul, because this is something that we have been working towards for the last 2 or 3 years with the previously the light regime that we were using was a mixture of fluorescent and incandescent lights to get that right wavelength. But with the phasing out of those incandescent lights, we have explored LED for one of the chambers 2 seasons ago, where we had the same parents in a few different light treatments, and we were happy enough with the results that we got from that treatment that we now have transitioned all of the rest of the chambers to the LEDs. We've just finished the crossing season, and I haven't yet reviewed the flowering success from across all of the chambers yet, but I was pleased enough with the results that we got from our initial test that we did end up changing all of our lights over at a pretty substantial cost, but I think it's been worth it. I don't think there's been any. The level of flowering was no better or worse than the lights that we already had.
The second question is, how do you know if it's self in the male by male cross?
That is also another good question. From previous work, we were always working under the assumption that sugarcane, because it's a naturally outcrossing species and we get inbreeding depression, that it also didn't like selfing, but we know that that's not necessarily true with some parents, particularly the marker work that we have been doing recently with smart markers. We do find that some particular parents do like to self. Based on some of that information, we are strategic in how we use those particular parents, but we also do find that some of the parents that do like to self, they tend to produce weak seedlings, which then do self-select either on the benches or out in the field as well. But that's a very good question, and we probably still have some level of selfing in those crosses that go unknown to us.
Thanks for listening. Karen has her hands up twice, so she has lots of questions. Go on, Karen.
That was actually a mistake. I can't do it once. I don't know why. But
Okay.
Anyway, my question, I was interested in that you're saying that you do some basic crossing. So if you're
Yes.
crossing between the fish arm and a spont, you know,
Yes.
to recreate a hybrid, so do you then not bother screening it in the field? You just sort of do rounds of crossing to recover the more, high sugar type?
That's a good question. It really depends on the purpose, the objective of what we're trying to achieve. I guess one of our most recent examples and a recent success, especially one of the successes of using the photoperiod facilities, is crossing when we identified those handful of nematode-resistant sponts from the population, which we crossed with some of our commercial varieties to try and fast-track producing the world's first nematode-resistant variety. So what we have done, because of the photoperiod facilities, we can manipulate the initiation time. We do know that sponsornet officinarums or sponts and even our core breeding population don't flower at the same time. But if we put them in the photoperiod facilities, we can get them to synchronize with the rest of the population that is field flowering to actually achieve those. And in this particular case, we have rapidly recycled those progeny back into the PFs for another 2 rounds, so that we have produced a BC2 population from these nematode-resistant sponts in as little as, I think, this is just off the top of my head, 3 years.
Okay, that's good. And another question I wanted to ask was, do you ever look at the genetic diversity of the parents, to see if you're crossing widely diverse parents as opposed to...
Yes, so we have used some of that information as well, but we use the pedigree where we don't have that information to fill in the gaps. And we do find that the more genetically unrelated the individuals are, the more diverse the seedlings are that we do produce, which is good for then capturing any of those
hybrid vigor or something.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, and there,
hand up.
Sorry, what? No, there. So there is. Yeah, Xiaoming, do you want to say something, or you have a question? All right. There is a question there. Are they using genomic selection in variety development?
So we are using genomic selection both in the selection program and for identifying parents at the moment, which is using it for the traits of yield, cane yield, CCS, and fiber content. We would ideally love to extend it to whether it's milling qualities, disease ratings, and so on, partly because of the cost of doing genomic selection. We want better return on our investment with more traits that we can then get results for. And then it's also, we also would like to use genomic selection in assisting us in better predicting cross combinations. And this is a topic of one of the PhDs that we are supporting one of our staff in doing over the next 3 years in using genomic predictions for in genomic selection for cross prediction specifically.
The second question is, have you developed conventional hybrids between inbred lines?
We don't really have inbred lines in sugarcane. It's all everything's a hybrid.
I'm going back to Xiaoming. Xiaoming, did you want to ask a question?
Thanks. No, I don't have any question.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so Varadum's got another question. Is it possible to cross or synchronize between early and late flowering variety in the natural field?
It is in other sugar industries that I have visited. We really struggle here in Australia, partly because of the environment in which we do grow our cane. There was one visit that one of my colleagues and I did to the Sri Lankan Sugar Research Institute, and there back in 2014. Their breeding station was based at the ideal altitude and latitude to get 8 weeks of complete synchronization. So it was a breeder's dream of being able to make any and every combination that you wanted. But because we are 10 meters from sea level and we don't have a high enough latitude. If we have explored other parts of the north here, this is the best conditions that we have, which is why we have invested the $2 million in the photoperiod facilities, where we get better control than what we can achieve with field initiation.
So just a quick question there. So if you were talking about, the cost of doing field crossing and not having the field crossing because you didn't do it last year, how much would you save money, and would you be able to build another photoperiod house with that money? Would it be beneficial anyway?
At the moment, we still need field crossing. At the moment, the photoperiod facilities do not produce enough seed for our annual requirements for the whole breeding program. So we still do need field crossing, unless we were to invest in more photoperiod facilities. We do find that because we have larger plot sizes in the field, we can make more bulk seed of particular cross combinations in the field as well. But it was one of those things that this year, it wasn't an easy decision. It was reviewing what we currently have in store, seed we have in store left over from last year's crossing operations versus the effort of actually making crosses and then weighing up what quality we might get, that I made the decision that we wouldn't do any field crossing. I thought it was a poor use of the budget for very little to no return. I'm hoping we don't have more years like this year, but I am finding that the last 14 years that I have been based here, we are getting more extreme weather events which do impact field flowering. So our reliance on the photoperiod facilities is getting greater, to the point that the majority of the seed that we produce and the majority of the seed that we select for the selection programs is from the photoperiod facilities.
Yeah. There is a question from Mathilde. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. What about the pollen compatibility? How do you evaluate that?
So I think the part of this is based on experience. So, and it really comes down to how we categorize what we use as a male and what we use as a female. So if it produces up to 20% viable pollen, we'll use it as a female. And if it produces 30% to 90% viable pollen, we'll use it as a male. However, within those categories, we do have some rules where, unless we're making a reciprocal cross between two males, we want those pollen tests between a male and a female to be at least 30–40% apart from each other. So if we have a 220 as a female, we want to make sure that we're crossing it with at least a 270, 280 or 290, a really strong male, to make sure that we get the best pollination from it.
A question from Danielle Salomon. So do you use the photoperiod chambers for variety that would be more unlikely to flower in the field, and have varieties that are likely to flower in worse condition to be bred in the field? How do you determine what goes in the photoperiod chambers?
That's a good question, because I think our strategy has changed over the years. I think initially it was used to try and get those reluctant parents to flower, but now, because we are taking very much a targeted approach with what cross combinations we want to achieve in the photoperiod facilities, we not only target shy flowerers, but we, regardless of the propensity from the field, we put them into the facilities, and it's more about which treatments do we put them in. It's more about controlling the synchronization than whether they flower or not. By controlling the initiation and synchronizing them, we can make combinations in the photoperiod facilities we can only dream about making in the field, regardless of whether it's a prolific flower or a shy flower. We find that not only is the flowering propensity an issue, it's the timing of the flowers as well. So we select parents regardless of the flowering propensity. What we might look at, though, is the number of stalks, the volume that we put in the photoperiod facilities to maximise the number of flowers we might get of those parents.
I got a question from Dr. Shahid Murtaza. What's your opinion about impact of climate change, especially global warming, on future breeding programs of sugarcane?
That's an interesting question. I think we're probably what we are experiencing here is due to climate change, with the sparse and unreliable flowering that we do get is getting more extreme, and the weather events that we are getting is more extreme. We do find that some parents that used to be quite prolific in the field are becoming more reluctant, which is why I think we will then have more of a reliance on the photoperiod facilities again. Then we have all the other issues of selecting varieties for some of those conditions as well. So there'll be challenges both with breeding and then selecting.
Asha has a question.
There we go. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I was just wondering how much work you do with molecular markers. You mentioned smut, but do you look for any other traits?
At this stage, that's implemented in the core selection program. We are mostly using for smut at the moment. We are working on some other traits, but I guess the smut marker one is the one that is most mature given the genetic complexity of sugarcane. And we do know that because most of the traits that we work with, pretty much all of them, are complex traits, even the smut markers that we have, we can't use on all of the parents. So it's only on a selection of the parents and a selection of the cross combinations that we make that we can successfully implement the smut marker chip.
Okay. So how does it work with the software that compares the parents to see if it's going to be a good match or not? What are the parameters that it's looking at?
Well, we identify those parents based on the three SNPs that we use for the smut markers, and then if there's enough segregation, if there's enough I might get, is Karen on the online? You're probably better placed to answer that question than me.
Or Jenny.
Or Jenny? Is Jenny online?
Yeah. Jenny, do you want to answer that?
Because Jenny's the one that actually does all the
Here she comes.
all work.
I am online. Can you please repeat the question again? I'm a little bit confused with the question.
Oh, so I was just wondering how you test, like, what are the parameters when you're looking at the two parents that makes them a good match?
I can only comment on the marker point. So Felicity will really do the selection. So each year they made a few hundred selections, and I go through all the parents with the markers, SNP markers we used, and I go through each combination of parents So we currently, the marker has to be polymorphic for the resistant parent and homozygous for the susceptible parent. And both parents has to have SMART ratings already been available. So we only go ahead with cross combinations with the male parent, with the resistant parent has the resistant allele, which is based on previous study, and the susceptible parent doesn't have the resistant allele. So in that case, in the siblings, we are able to pick the progenies which has the resistance allele and which most likely the resistant parent passed on the resistance to the progeny. So that's what we do at this stage. Hopefully I said it clearly.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
So that's one of our limitations in that we can't do it to our whole population. And really is just, so it's roughly about 10% of the seedlings that we put to the field that often meet that criteria.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted actually. I muted myself. Before I write it up, just wanted to read a few comments from Shahid, for example. I must say it's exceptional piece of research work from Isis. Fantastic work. It is so good to see a bit of the process. And I've got another comment from Raul. What did he say? Where is it now? I've lost it. Because he asked, thank you, Felicity, and congratulations for your work. I would love to have some insight on the LD systems usage example relation between white and yellow light. So this is the comments. I had a question. Who is the most annoying breeders for crossing? Who's the most,
Demanding?
Yeah, demanding. I was going to say demanding.
I plead the fifth. I don't want to. No comment.
Oh, come on.
No, they're all lovely.
Oh, yeah, right. So just one last quick question. So, like you do the selection process, you do the cross. So because we always select for like CCS and fibers, so how do you know we don't select always for the same thing and like your diversity is not as, important as you want?
I'm just what we use a similar so what we're trying to achieve, like earlier in the presentation, what we're trying to achieve is more productive, more profitable varieties for the sugar industry. So the selection index that we use within the selection program, we use that same index. Instead of using genetic values, we use the breeding values. So we use the same economic worth of each of those traits in trying to decide which cross combinations we want to make. So we can have a very balanced approach in terms of producing a variety, whether it's improving yield, CCS, fiber content, disease resistance. At the same time, to try and improve and increase the genetic diversity, that's where we use the pedigree information as well, or the genetic distance to try and by avoiding crossing either close relatives or individuals that are genetically very similar.
And so do you think like everywhere in the world, like we all do the same, or are we something very different than other programs, or?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question 100%.
You need to travel around to go and have a
I
look.
do. I do. I know other programs do use generate BLUPs similar to us. I guess what we have is quite a different selection index to everyone else in terms of how we generate those EBVs that we use. And also, I guess, one of our very powerful tools, which I think we take for granted sometimes, is the plant breeding database that we use as well, SPIDNet, which allows us to manage all of that breeding data and to simultaneously handle all of those traits at the same time. I'm not sure how I could do this role without the database like SPIDNet, especially the crossing program that we have developed.
Very well. Well, thanks again, Felicity, for presenting today. And I think we can all agree that actually we learned a lot today about the life of sugarcane behind the curtains. So thank you all for your attendance too. I hope you have enjoyed today's webinar and that you will join us for the next SRA webinar coming soon.
Have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Yes, have a lovely weekend. And so for information of this webinar, please visit the events page on the SRA website. And thank you again and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Felicity.